Welcome to this new lesson. Today, I'm going to talk about agricultural waste management in Europe, focusing on the European framework and the national legislative approach of several countries. This topic is particularly important because agriculture plays a double role. It is essential for food production, but at the same time, it has significant environmental impact. Understanding how Europe has developed its policies from early environmental action programs to the most recent circular economy initiatives will help us see how agriculture can become part of the solution to climate change and resource management. In Europe, different organizations have dealt with environmental issues connected to agriculture. The Common Agricultural Policy, born in 1962, began to integrate environmental issues into its objectives. The Common Agricultural Policy can be described as a true partnership between farmers and society, and today it aims to tackle climate change and ensure the sustainable management of natural resources. Since 1973, with the environmental action programs, Europe has been building the foundation of modern environmental legislation. The very first program was launched in response to rising concerns about ecological decline and the risk of exhausting natural resources, as highlighted by scientific studies of that time. This pioneering program introduced three key principles that still guide European environmental policy today: the prevention principle, the obligation to tackle pollution at its source, and the polluter pays principle. A major step at the international level was the Kyoto Protocol, signed in 1997 under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. For the first time, binding targets for reducing greenhouse gases emission were introduced for developed countries. The protocol came into force in 2005 and involved 192 countries. Its goal was clear: to oblige industrialized countries to adopt mitigation policies and to report periodically on their progress. Even though some countries, such as the United States, refused to ratify it due to economic concerns, the Kyoto Protocol still represents the first concrete step toward a global climate commitment. Here we can see the map of the Kyoto Protocol ratification. Countries that signed and ratified in green, those still pending in yellow, and those that declined in red. An interesting point is that the protocol did not impose binding obligation on developing countries such as China and India. At that time, this created a gap in commitments, but it also laid the foundation for more comprehensive agreements later on, such as the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is a legally binding international treaty on climate change. It was adopted by 195 parties at the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris on the 12th December of 2015. It entered into force on the 4th November of 2016. The agreement aims to reduce the global emission and work together to adapt to the impacts of climate change and calls on countries to strengthen their commitments over time. The two main goals are to hold the increase in the global average temperature to well below the 2 centigrades above pre-industrial levels and pursue effort to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 centigrade above pre-industrial level. The UN's Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change indicates that crossing the 1.5 centigrades threshold risks unleashing far more severe climate change impacts, including more frequent and severe drought, heat waves, and rainfall. Moreover, the agreement provides a pathway for developed nations to assist the developing nation in their climate mitigation and adaptation efforts, while creating a framework for the transparent monitoring and reporting of countries' climate goals. The Paris Agreement provides a durable framework guiding the global effort for decades to come. It marks the beginning of a shift towards a net zero emissions world. Implementation of the agreement is also essential for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. The Paris Agreement operates on 5-year cycles of increasingly ambitious climate action carried out by countries. Every 5 years, each country is expected to submit an updated national climate action plan, known as Nationally Determined Contribution. The agreement functions through a 5-year ratcheting up cycle of increasing ambition climate action. Since 2020, countries have been submitting their NDCs, each expected to reflect a higher level of ambition than the previous one. In their NDCs, countries outline the actions they will take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to build resilience against the impacts of rising temperatures in order to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. In 2023, the first global stocktake of global efforts under the Paris Agreement concluded at COP28 with a decision on how to accelerate action across all areas, mitigation, adaptation, and finance by 2030. This included a call for governments to speed up the transition away from fossil fuels toward renewable energy, such as wind and solar power, in their next round of climate commitments. From 1975 onwards, the European Union built a strong legal framework for managing agriculture and environmental waste. In 1975, the Directive 75442 EEC introduced for the very first time definition and principles such as waste, recovery, and disposal. In 1986, the Sewage Sludge Directive set limits to protect soils from heavy metals, while in 1991, the Nitrates Directive targeted water pollution from agriculture, introducing nitrate vulnerable zones and codes of good agricultural practice. During the 2000s, the European Commission shifted more strongly towards prevention with the Directive 2006-12 EC and especially the 2008 Waste Framework Directive, which introduced the waste hierarchy and the end of waste concept. Finally, more recently, the Regulation 2019-1009 created the basis for fertilizers made from recycled organic materials. This entire evolution reflects the Europe's shift from simply managing waste to transforming waste into valuable resources. The Directive 91676 EEC represents one of the first approaches to prevent the water pollution. It was emanated in 1991 to protect water from nitrates of agricultural origin, and it is known as the Nitrates Directive. This directive has two main objectives. One, to reduce water pollution caused by nitrates from agricultural sources, and two, to prevent further pollution. The directive is managed by the member states and involves the following intervention. First, the quality control of surface and groundwater. Second, the designation of nitrate vulnerable zones on the basis of nitrate content in surface and groundwater, such as zone with values about 50 milligrams liters of nitrogen. And third, the definition of codes of good agricultural practice and of the measure to be implemented in specific action programs for areas that are vulnerable to nitrates. In these areas, the animal load cannot exceed the capable of supplying 170 kilos of nitrogen per hectare each year. The designation of calculation criteria for nitrogen excretion and therefore of the live weight corresponding to a load of 170 kilos of nitrogen is delegated to the individual states. The codes of good agricultural practice must include rules relating to various agricultural activities and management of livestock waste that are relevant in environmental terms. The use of fertilizer in areas close to watercourses and on sloping land, or methods of manure storage, manure spreading meters, fertilizer application periods, crop rotation, and other land management measures. The action programs must include mandatory measures for vulnerable areas relating to the periods of prohibition of the application of certain types of fertilizer, a capacity of storage facilities for manure, a limitation on the application of fertilizer, such as if there is a sloping land, frozen or covered land with snow, in the vicinity of watercourses, as well as other measures defined in the codes of good agricultural practice. The main concept of European Union waste legislation can be summarized in 3 points. First, the waste hierarchy: prevention, reuse, recycling, recovery, and disposal only as a last option. Second, the sustainable use of natural residues such as straw and manure, which, if managed properly, are not considered waste but valuable resources. And third, incentives for organic waste recovery, for example, through composting and biogas production, which are central to the circular economy. The table summarizes the action made by different European countries to follow the European directive. We can see here how Italy, Greece, Romania, Ukraine, and Portugal have dealt with the agricultural waste management procedure. In Italy, the Legislative Decree 152 of 2006 is the comprehensive environmental code setting the rules for classification, collection, and treatment of waste. In addition, the Law 221 of 2015 promotes aerobic composting at household and community level, offering incentives and simplified procedures. Moreover, in 2013, Italy launched its National Waste Prevention Program, focusing specifically on reducing biowaste, especially food waste and manure, in rural areas. Meanwhile, in Greece, the Law 4042 of 2012 introduced an integrated waste management system, transposing the EU Waste Framework Directive. Later, the Law 4685 of 2020 updated national policies to align with the European Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan. Greece has invested heavily in energy recovery from organic waste, promoting waste-to-energy plants, while also setting the ambitious goal of reducing landfill disposal below 10% by 2030. In Romania, the government decision 235 of 2007 established the National Waste Management Strategy, focused on prevention, reuse, and recycling, with the specific attention to agriculture and livestock waste. The government decision 349 of 2005 regulates animal byproducts not intended for human consumption, ensuring strict collection, transport, and treatment rules in line with the European Union standards. Thanks also to the EU funding, Romania has built manure storage platforms and promotes good agricultural practices, especially in nitrate vulnerable areas. In Ukraine, the legal framework evolved mainly after the European Union-Ukraine Association Agreement. The National Waste Management Strategy up to 2030, approved in 2017, set out a comprehensive plan to improve waste classification and recycling, including agricultural waste. In 2023, Law 23209 introduced the principles of the waste hierarchy, extended producer responsibility, and the polluter pays principle. However, Ukrainian farmers now face administrative challenges. They must obtain permits and carry out environmental impact assessment to process manure into compost, a costly and bureaucratic procedure. In Portugal, the Decree Law 102-TD of 2020 established the general framework for waste management, incorporating the latest European Union Waste Framework Directive. It defined responsibilities for waste producers, the classification of agricultural residues, and the rules for byproduct and end-of-waste status. Decree Law 152-D of 2017 complemented this system by introducing extended procedure responsibility for agricultural packaging, used oil, and plastic waste. The Portuguese Environmental Agency supervises the system, requiring electronic records and licensing. These measures support efficient manure management, composting system, and the transition towards a circular economy. To conclude, the European framework for agricultural waste management has evolved significantly, combining legislation, innovation, and sustainability. Europe today promotes a circular economy where agricultural residues such as manure or straw can be turned into resources like compost or biogas. Challenges remain: harmonizing national policies, supporting farmers in adopting eco-friendly practices, and dealing with the new and emerging waste streams. The future will focus on closer integration with climate goals, technological innovation, and stronger incentives for sustainable farming. In conclusion, agricultural waste management in Europe has moved a long way from simple disposal practices to a more sustainable circular model. Through the European Union directives and national laws, the focus has shifted toward prevention, recovery, and resource efficiency. Each country applies these principles in different ways, but the overall direction is clear: transforming agricultural waste into an opportunity. The challenge for the future will be to harmonize policy, support farmers with practical solutions, and keep innovation at the center of agricultural practices. Thank you for your attention.